The year is 1967, and the European Space Agency have just successfully launched their first mission. The Mars Express, a multi-purpose spacecraft designed to orbit and image the Martian surface, and the Beagle Lander, a design from the British Interplanetary Society that aims to soft land on the surface of Mars. Hello everyone and welcome back to For All Kerbalkind. We will be catching up with that Mars Express at some point, but this episode is going to be disastrous for the European Space Agency. There is some good news at the beginning though, as we unlock basic capsules, which means we can finally send our own crew to low Earth orbit. You may recall that I have done this in the past, but that was with a very generous helping hand from the Soviets. The Bearded Penguin very kindly allowed me to use one of his rockets to send Jeffrey Decouplers up to space. However, the European Space Agency and the Commonwealth Space Commission aren't quite happy with this arrangement. We would like to be able to do that by ourselves, and that is something that we aim to achieve before 1967 is out. Anyway, we are on to our first launch of this episode, and this is going to be an attempt at impacting the moon. Now, usually when I fly these rockets, I use surface mode on Smart ASS, but at the very beginning of that, it was pointing in the completely wrong direction that I was telling it to. I'm not entirely sure what was causing that, but just using the kill rotation feature, I was able to kind of correct this rocket's trajectory and attempt to get it up to orbit. Now, this is something that was very bizarre, and well, it wasn't bizarre. This was something that was a problem from updating my game. Because this craft was built on a much older version of RP-1, I did not have any helium in my tanks for my RCS. This is a problem because that meant that my RCS on this craft is now completely useless. It does appear to be that helium leaks are all the rage these days. Not that that really matters, because I am able to get this craft to orbit and we begin plotting out our maneuver to go to the moon. Obviously, this is going to be rather difficult to achieve, considering I have no control over the spacecraft right now. I have no way to point it in the right direction, apart from using the engine to turn it, which is a massive problem, and one that is going to be incredibly difficult to overcome. But I have plotted myself out a lovely maneuver to get us over to the moon, and we are going to do exactly that. Use that engine to try and turn, even though I was a little bit late at clicking node, and that unfortunately meant that I burnt far too much with that stage. I have 3,099 meters per second in this solid rocket that just fired up, and the burn that I am going to be attempting is a lot more than that, and that means we are going to shoot right past the moon. A bit of a failure this time. We are going to be going into planetary, but we will not hit the moon today. So I'm going to come back into the vehicle assembly building and make a quick few edits to the design so that hopefully we can actually hit the moon and roll it straight out and launch this on the 10th of April 1967. The second attempt of this episode to do a contract that really I should be able to complete in my sleep at this point in this career. This is the fourth year that I have been in this series. Is that the right terminology? But yes, this should be something that I can do with my eyes shut, and yet this is causing me no end of pain, and there have been a lot of updates to this contract, the Lunar Impactor, over the years since I first started playing RP-1, and some very pivotal changes to the way that science core avionics work means that I cannot get away with such a lighter launch vehicle as I have used in the past. However, this should be somewhat capable, although still using an SRB with the inclusion of things such as, well, really only one thing. Variance means that this is probably going to be insanely difficult to use to hit the moon. This is something that I thought, nah, it's fine, I can get over this, I don't need to worry about variance in the slightest, and decided, yeah, we'll use a solid because it means that the launch vehicle that I can use to hit the moon is going to be a lot smaller. Anyway, we have made it to orbit with no failures. That is always a nice thing because test light is in this install and things can go wrong at a moment's notice. I did plot out my maneuver to the moon, however, due to a lack of communication when I needed to perform the burn, I had to wait another couple of orbits until I was over a ground station and actually had signal to fire up this stage. This is something that is proving very problematic at the moment, and Beardy has so kindly offered me the use of his geostationary network. For some reason though, and I'm not entirely sure why, I cannot get any signal bounced off of those vessels at the moment. I might need to go into the save file and enable communications on because I believe he turned that off so that N9 would not be able to use them, but he has granted me permission, so I need to go and check that. Anyway, my good old friend Variance has meant that we have fallen far short of impacting the moon this time. Despite using every single last drop of RCS fuel on this, we are still some ways off. Another failure. Hopefully, the third launch of this episode on the 1st of May will go a little bit better. This is Fish 2, and as is traditional for a rocket launched in Australia, we just let go of it and it flies to space because, of course, Australia is upside down. I really don't know what happened here, but there is no plume, there is no atmospheric effects, it just looks really weird. I probably should have gone back and filmed some cinematic footage for this, but it would have looked very strange having cinematics of the rocket looking normal and the actual in-game footage looking completely wonky like this. So yeah, I decided for once I'm just going to show the entire ascent of a vehicle, because I don't really tend to do that. And that's because, for the most part, it's just really boring. But what's better than seeing a rocket magically lifting to space? Anyway, Fish is, yeah, it's a Fish satellite. I've launched one of these before. These are going to be my communications network because, of course, I am going to be flooding low Earth orbit with Fish and Chips. Fish being the communications ones, that was quite difficult to say that, and Chips being the navigation satellites, and yes, I'm going to have a whole network of them so that every time that Beardy and N9 open up their save, they can be reminded of the glorious thing that is Fish and Chips. And yeah, it's just a silly little joke playing as the UK Space Agency. Anyway, we are able to, well, get to orbit. We're still some way off yet because this stage here, the RZ-20, which is the British equivalent of the RL-10, well, this burns for, I believe, about 6 minutes. So this is quite painful, and I really don't like doing this. I much prefer in Kerbal Gets Real Redux when I'm allowed to use MechJeb Ascent guidance, but we're not allowed to use that for this series, and it's a bit sad because it does make it a lot more difficult getting cinematics. Basically, in order to get cinematics for this series, what I have to do is I quick save before every single launch that I do, and then I go back and I film them again, and then you get the beautiful cinematics. But that does mean it takes a lot longer to make one of these episodes compared to KGRR, mainly because with that series, I can film it all in pretty much the first go, because I don't have to worry about the rocket. It knows where it's going at all times. It's not a missile, but it knows where it's going, so I can just let Camera Tools do its beautiful thing and get a lovely cinematic without much effort at all. Anyway, we have put Fish 2 into an orbit. Now, I didn't even have a contract for this. The only reason why I have placed this in orbit is because I can build these very, very fast, and as we saw from the last launch, I was running into some communications issues. Anyway, we are going to turn to Pyramus 7 3 days after launching that last satellite from Australia. We are going to attempt to go back to the moon, and this time we are going to land. We've tried this once before with the help of N9, who gifted us a chitin, but we now have a launch vehicle that is capable. I say that if all of the engines are able to work. what happens if 2 fail? Well, that leads to disaster. And this is why I very nearly went bankrupt over the course of this episode. This was a bloody expensive rocket for me, and I was really kind of banking on this working, instead of having to blow it up like that. So in the meantime, we're going to come to the spaceplane hangar of all places, because there is a very special aircraft that I want to be rolling out by the next episode. And if the very iconic nose or cockpit of this aircraft even doesn't give it away, well, we're going to be working on Concorde. Now, this is not the first time that I've actually designed Concorde for this series. I had a Concorde in my trailer, and the Concordski that Beardy used in his episode, aptly named the Concordski, I think, I can't remember exactly what the title was actually my Concorde that he modified. So I have built one of these before, however, once again, due to us updating the game, my old craft file got broken. And I thought, with me unlocking the Concorde engines very, very soon now, what better time to go back and create it? Especially as I feel like I've gotten a little bit better at building planes over the past couple of years. That's right, the first time I actually built the Concorde for this series was before I even joined the series, about 3 years ago. I think I started working on this, so I like to think I've gotten a little bit better at designing wing, because that wing is, I mean, at the moment it doesn't look brilliant, but hopefully with a little bit more finagling and a little bit of playing around with B9 procedural wings, I will make it look somewhat like the Concorde. And I was quite happy with how that wing was looking there. Now, I don't show it over this build because this build is already ridiculously long, but I do go in and I edit those wings ever so slightly. I add a little bit of, I don't really know what the right word, I make them slightly concave, I guess, is the right terminology. I really don't know much about planes. Planes are not my speciality. But yes, I had an image of the actual Concorde on my other screen. I had dimensions of Concorde, and I had a couple of images up, and then basically I was trying to replicate that as much as possible. Right now, what I'm trying to work on is, I want to say the engine mount, or at least the box that holds the engines in. The engine thing. There's probably an actual name for it, but yes, no, we're working on the engines, and this was something that was not really present in my first build of this. I kind of had, I think I used a wing rather than procedural tanks, and that really was quite possibly my least favourite part of the previous build. It just, the engines just did not look good, and I really struggled in finding a way of making these a little bit better. So the way I've kind of gone about it is, yeah, I use procedural tanks for the kind of blocky main look of those engines, and I use the polygonal, how on earth do you say that word? Anyway, no, I used the one that made them look like a square, and made them very long, and had a couple of them run down the length of it. And then to get the intake at the front, I actually used more procedural wings, because I find that procedural wings, they're really good at manipulating. Like, you can make some really awesome shapes out of those wings. And basically, the whole of this intake, like, we've got a couple of actual intakes in there, because if I didn't have that, then well, the engines would not work. But the whole design of the intake is more built around the wings, with those actual KSP intakes just kind of tucked away in the inside. And these do work. I have tested this, and those wings aren't blocking the airflow, which is absolutely fantastic. But what I'm doing right now is trying to get the gears as I kind of want to say as close to the real Concorde landing gears as possible. So once again, I refer back to the diagram that I was using to build this, and I noticed that the back wheels were about the same distance down the fuselage as the start of the engine, so I placed those there, and the front wheel was roughly where the wings started, and I think it kind of works where they are. And if you look at the center of mass, the back wheels being just behind that, well, that means that it should be somewhat easy to take off. They are in the right place. Anyway, I am working on the tail right now, and I'm actually going to build this out of multiple procedural wings, much like I did with the main wings themselves. And this is to really try and get that kind of like iconic Concorde tail going on. And I think I somewhat managed to achieve it. Now, I've not colored it in yet, but having multiple of these wings also means that I can do some pretty cool designs with them, which I did on the old one, but I'm, pretty happy with how this whole thing is looking. Now, the last little bit of the puzzle is to have some elevons on the back of this, and I found out that with a delta wing, these are called elevons and not ailerons. Thank you, Calvin, for your how to build a plane video that taught me that. But that's pretty much it. And it does fly. This is just a simulation at the moment. I've not actually built one of these yet because I still do not have the technology that I need. I am waiting on advanced jet engines so that I can unlock the Olympus engine, which is going to be what powers this plane. Although where this episode ends, I am only about 30 days away from unlocking that engine, and I do have a use for this plane that I want to be seeing used quite frequently in the coming episodes. Now, we are going to once again come to a launch. 5 launches in 3 months. I'm really catching up. This is going to be Pyramus NI-I. NI-I standing for New Impactor 1. I've only got one more Impactor contract to complete. I have got no money whatsoever at the moment. I think when I launched this, I was on about 5,000 funds. I was desperate for money. I unlocked crude capsules at the beginning of this episode. I have not been able to unlock them. I have not been able to build up a rocket for sending a crew to space, or just one Kerbal to space, because I don't have the funding. I've run out of money. The European Space Agency is in complete danger right now, and if this doesn't work, well, then I might as well pack my bags, go home, and call it a day. Well, that would be really, truly, and honestly disastrous. So we really got to hope that this is the Impactor that could. The Impactor that was destined to smack the moon. And I have overbuilt this. I have built this so big, it's no longer using solid rockets. It's using another RZ-20. We're using Hydrolox upper stages or even in-orbit stages to go to the moon. This is something that I've not done for an incredibly long time, because this just, it means you need a bigger launch vehicle. Although that being said, I was able to get this launched on the Black Duke, which was what I was using for the other 3. You can see we have very strong signal there, so I am quite happy to fire up that engine. Because this stage has 3,500 meters per second of delta V, if I ran out of signal before the burn finished, well, I would be in a bit of a predicament, because I would once again go shooting right past the moon. So I did wait in orbit for a couple of orbits before even attempting this to ensure that I was directly over a ground station before firing up that engine and overburning, because that would have been a problem. That would have been a real problem, but you may have seen the burn was successfully completed. We are on our way to the moon. We have a direct impact course. Finally, I'm gonna have a bit of pocket change to play with. Look, it's gonna take us a while, but we are there. We are in the moon's sphere of influence right now. Yeah, there we go. And look, it's the moon. Finally, we're gonna do it. And I've even got the contract up on the right, just to be sure that it works. And we hit it, and Lunar Impactor, Moon Impact Craft, we've done it. We've been given an influx of cash. The European Space Agency is saved, and that means I can go in and I can build up Sparrow 1, which we're going to be seeing in the next episode. It's going to be a British launch vehicle, and it's going to send one Kerbal to space, and it cost only about 10,000. Really not that expensive. But anyway, news from the other space agencies. On the 12th of June, 1967, the European Space Agency. I mean, we're dealt a crushing blow. basically, I talked about Mars Express earlier on. I wanted to be the first person to land something on Mars, but by golly, N9 went and did it. He landed Wanderer 2 on the surface of Mars. However, there was a bit of a problem with that, and I'm fairly sure that I will cut scene in a second and we can see what happened to Wanderer 2. Yes, there it is. Wanderer 2, the great Mars rover, unfortunately had a little bit of a rough landing, and it landed upside down. So this means that we're not the first to land on Mars, but we can still be the first kind of agency that's somewhat based in Europe to land on the surface of Mars, right? At least that's what I'm telling myself. That's how I get to sleep at night. I think we can do it, but yes. Here is the Mars Express and Beagle. The tiny little thing on the bottom of that is a Beagle, and I am really pleased with how that actually turned out. I cannot wait until next episode, until I can finally unfold that and show you exactly what it looks like, because I'm really pleased with it. Like, honestly, it's one of my favourite things that I have ever built. But the race for Mars is still on. Well, the race between ESA and the Soviets is still on, because we both have craft heading to Mars right now, and they are going to arrive at roughly the same time. So we'll see who touches down first. Who will be the second nation to successfully land something on the surface of Mars? Well, we will be finding out, hopefully, very, very soon.